just that everything will go well and that we'll be ready for that upcoming event. Once again, we just thank you for sending Jesus to die for us and for the hope of eternal life we have because of that. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. Okay, so we are continuing our study on what the Bible teaches about money, and we're missing a few people here, I see, but hopefully they'll be here sometime. But anyway, the last couple of weeks we've gone through just general biblical principles. I won't go through all of them again. Hopefully you have the handout that I gave you, or can go back and look at last week's lesson if you want. The one thing I will say just to start us off here is, some of this is very comparable to the series of lessons that if you look at the Life Church and Money Matters that they have online. And so they had what they call the 5 basic principles. They're different a little bit from what I went through, but theirs are, to just go through real quick, and this is what we're going to be talking about today: get out of debt, or don't get into debt if you're not in debt. Number 2, act your wage. That means spend appropriately, not more than what you make. Number 3, get on a budget. We'll talk more about that at another time. Very important, though, to get on a budget. Then saving and investing. That's what we'll talk about next week, probably. And then finally, giving, which is not finally, because that's one of the first things that we should be doing as Christians according to God's Word. So those are their principles that they have in connection with Dave Ramsey and through that. And we went through that, and then we went through a bunch of scriptures and other things talking about what the Bible has to say about money and what we're to do with it. We ended last week talking about getting started on debt. And let me see. Yeah, there we go. That's up there. Good. Let me see if I can get this on. All right. So we talked about, and let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Yep, there we go. The main thing that we keep coming back to in this series is what the biblical view of money is, that God owns it all. Basically, we just get to be entrusted with the management of it. So every decision that we make should be one that God is pleased with. So that's kind of the foundation principle that we want to continue to deal with. We talked about how money is discussed in the Bible. One of the biggest areas that is discussed in the New Testament, a lot of parables from Jesus and discussions deal with greed. If I remember correctly, let's see, greed's one of the 7 deadly sins too, right? Am I right on that? Isn't greed one of those? I think so. Anyway, so it's in the Old Testament too. And then also spending money unwisely is talked about a lot throughout the Bible. We went to Proverbs 22:7, and I didn't write that down. Oh wait, yeah, I did. There it is. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the servant of the lender. We talked about how debt plagues many families in the United States, and it's estimated that as high as 80% of families in the United States have more debt than they can afford. That was back a while ago. That might even be higher than that now. I don't know. But debt load causes all kinds of problems. Leads to a lot of stress no matter what, and then can lead to divorce and just family strife and all kinds of problems. So we're going to talk about the effect that debt can have on our lives and how we can manage it better. Also, we talked about Romans 13:8, and Paul there says, "Owe nothing to anyone except to love one another." So the passage, and we talked a little bit about this, the passage says that we should owe no one anything. Does that mean that we should never borrow money? We answered that question, no, because if that were the case, then what was all the other instructions in the Old Testament about, where it's talking about borrowing money and how to lend to people? It would be contradiction if you were going through that. But what it means in reality is to owe nothing, to not get into debt more than what we can afford to pay, I would say, is another way of saying that. So anyway, I think that the scripture says that we should never borrow more than we can repay, and we need to be able to pay our debts as they come due. And so since that's the case, debt has to be considered part, if you're going through a budget, which like I said, we're kind of doing this out of order, so we'll have to go back to doing the budget later, but it has to be part of that budget. If you're in debt, like paying down that debt has to be part of that budget. All right, so we're not, we talked, well, actually we didn't talk about that. We'll back up on that. Okay, we did talk about it a little bit, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more. All right, so a question that I asked, no, I was there. Never mind, I'm right there. Okay, sorry, getting confused. I'm trying to get my notes matched up with where we're at on this presentation. So, what problems do you think of having too much debt can cause for our families? And there they are. So I wasn't supposed to put that up yet because I wanted to answer it before we put it up. But anyway, problems can add stress in marriage, can cause divorce, can cause somebody to work way too much to try to pay off the debt. And that can lead to other problems like no quality time with your family. Children can suffer because too much money has to go to pay the debt, so they can't get anything extra. You don't have anything extra for them. Yes?
I want to give you a real example of how generationally you can really mess up your children. So in our family, Parent Plus loans were like, that was the thing. Take out Parent Plus loans, which the parent owns that debt. Well, my dad went to prison, right? 2011. We found out from debt collectors who are trying to get the money out of us, there was $1.5 million in debt because of compound interest working against us, and the debt collectors were coming after us for that debt. So, and we had all individually, we had paid my dad back our portion of the debt. He lied to us and said that he paid it down, never paid it down. And so we lucked out where they came back and finally it just kind of went away, but they said because it was his debt, the debt collectors couldn't come after us. But that's an example, were it not Parent Plus loan debt, but some other kind of debt, you can really mess your kids' lives up for forever.
Yep. Yeah, no doubt about that. Yep. So yeah, children can suffer whenever we don't handle our own finances correctly. And then can cause our priorities to be wrongly shifted. So in other words, money that you could give to others or do something profitable with ends up having to go to service the debt. Which, servicing the debt, does that sound familiar to anybody? You hear that a lot with our deficit in our country. So our country does not operate good financially. You do not want to follow the example of our politicians. That is a good way to bankrupt yourself. All right. I'm going to back up. Once again, I just went too fast. All right. So if that was just borrowing money and then paying some back each week, so in other words, if you've got the right amount of debt and you're paying the right amount back or whatever, that's one thing. But whenever you put too much and you get too far out where you can't afford it, then you get into the situation of Proverbs 22:7 where it talks about the rich rule over the poor, right? And the lender has control over the borrower in that situation. This bondage can rob a person of part of the fruits of their labor, and this is because when a person borrows money, you have to pay interest until the loan is repaid, and interest is lost money. As we talked about last week, or the week before, I don't remember which week, like whenever you borrow money to buy a car, you have to pay interest on it. So you're paying for the car plus the amount of interest that you pay. We'll talk about that more when we get a little bit into this. If you save money to buy a car instead, you get interest on the money as you save it. So instead of paying the extra money, you're getting it. Now, it's not a lot usually because you're saving small amounts, but it's still the truth and it's still the case. So that's important thing to realize. All right, so we're talking, as you saw on that next thing, we talked about wise debt. Now then, this would be controversial to some people, and I actually think I did this slide back a long time ago, and I don't know that I would even agree with all of the things on here, so we're going to talk about this. So what is wise debt? Potentially wise debt. Because there's questions that you need to ask before you would do any of this, but potentially wise debt might be a business loan. So if you don't have the money to start a business, like for instance, that requires some piece of equipment. Like if you're going to be a delivery person and you need a truck, maybe, once again, maybe it might be wise to get a loan to start that. That could be something that you could do. Mortgage to buy a house can certainly be wise. Can be not wise too, depending on the situation. Vehicle loan, like we just were talking, maybe not. It's always better to save to buy a car than to borrow, but could be potentially. And then credit card. And I have in caps there for emergency purposes only. However, a qualifier on that, if you're having to use a credit card for emergency purposes, what does that mean? That you don't have an emergency fund. So you didn't do what needed to be done before to get into that situation. Plus, you can never put more on the credit card based on our principles that we were just talking about than what you can afford to pay off, right? So if you're going into debt more than what you can pay off anyway, so this would be more, I would say that this would be more like something where, like, just for, like, you actually have the money, you just can't get to it or something, and you'd have to put it down for just a brief, like you'll be able to pay it off the next month or whatever, is more of what I would call that, not to go into debt for something. So that's got to be, like I said, major qualifier there as far as that goes. I think if you talk to Dave Ramsey, he would say never put anything on a credit card, period, right? Isn't that what it's usually, no matter what? So, yeah.
Sometimes you need, like, if you're breaking
you can use a debit card, I mean, as opposed to a credit card for the electronic stuff. So there are ways to not use a credit card where it's actually using the cash that you have in your account. So you can do that, but yeah, it's almost impossible to not have some kind of electronic payment these days. Some people won't even take cash or check. You have to pay by some kind of credit. But what's that? Just don't go to those places. Well, the Turnpike doesn't take cash anymore, does it? You have to have Easy Pass or something. So, yeah, there's places where you have to have electronic, but like I said, there is a way to actually use your cash as opposed to credit for doing that. So anyway, like I said, these are all there's qualifiers based on some other things that we're going to talk about here in just a minute, but maybe those are things that make sense at points. Okay, so actually here are the questions. So, well, I'll let you guys do this first. What do you think are some questions that ought to be asked before you do any of this? What's something you ought to ask yourself before you go get a mortgage?
How much can I afford each month?
How much can you afford each month? That's certainly right on top, right? How much can you afford?
Interest rate,
What's the interest rate? How much extra am I paying because of this? Yep.
the taxes, the insurance, everything else. Like if you're in the borough or the township.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of that. When I got out of college and started working, one of the first things I wanted to do was go get a car. And this once again, I would say, don't do this. I didn't have the money for the car, so I had to get a loan. The car itself wasn't a problem. It didn't cost that much. How much is insurance on a single 21-year-old male? I wasn't counting on that when I bought the new car. That got me into trouble. So insurance can catch you. So whenever you go to make a purchase, make sure you know all of the costs that are going to be involved in it before you do that. That's not necessarily a question, but that's something you should do for sure. All right, maybe it might be good to say, if you're a family and you're married, are we in agreement about going into this debt? Is this something that we think we should do? So in other words, don't go out and do it on your own if there's somebody else involved in this. Why are we going into debt? Does it make sense to do so? Can we have spiritual peace of mind, or can I have spiritual peace of mind over this debt? So if there's any question about paying it back, or if the reason's not good, or things like that.
What's our plan if one of us loses a job?
Well, that's something you always have to consider. Like, how secure am I in what I have, and where in my job, and in what's coming in, and all those kind of things? Are you meeting your financial goals by taking on the debt? Is it helping or hurting? Once again, going back to stress, will making payments on the debt cause financial stress? Well, am I taking on too much, going back to what you said? How much can I afford? And then finally, and not finally, probably first, would God be pleased with my decision to do this, to go into the debt? If we think about it that way, that should help in making some wise decisions, I would hope. All right, I think we just, went down through there. I forgot to write down that I had that so that we could keep going down. All right, so there you go. Just general purchases, not even debt, yeah. Is it a wise decision to do or not? And that kind of, some people would, I think there's different, people think differently. There's different opinions on some of that stuff. Like, okay, if I've already made a plan and I've given and I still have stuff left over, is it okay for me to spend it on myself? Or should I go find somebody else to give it to? You know, that's up to, each individual can make a decision on what to do with their excess money. If you've already done your financial plan and you've done what's right with it, so.
Until you're married, and then you.
Right. Well, yeah.
Probably be in agreement.
Each individual or person, unit, whatever's involved there. Yep. Okay. So debt can be expensive, and one of the things that can help us to see foolishness of unwise debt is to see how expensive it can be. Jimmy always likes to talk about compound interest. This is kind of the opposite of compound interest. This is where you're paying more for what you're buying. So expensiveness of debt. And let me see how we're going to do this. Yeah, these were whenever they were running specials, like 1.9. But here's what I wanted to show with this example, I think. Actually, no, I don't have it on that one. That's not good. Let's see about, is it this one?
That's more realistic.
Yeah, well, anyway, going back to this one. Am I showing? Okay, so this isn't exactly what there's a bunch of different ways you can look at it. So this first example, purchasing a car, if you're financing a car with debt and your debt is $20,000, what I was showing with this one is simply how much more interest you pay if you extend the term. Now then the payment is less, and that's why, there it is, $358 versus $571. You might be able to afford a monthly payment more so, right? Because it's less, but you're paying close to $1,000 more over the life of the loan? And that's the same interest rate. Like that, well, not same, that's 2.9 versus 1.9, but I think that's why I had another amortization schedule, which I have up here, I think. Let me see. If I can remember not to hit escape here, that's the key, right? Yeah, here we go.
Do it.
So this was if you just change same rate, but just change the period of time, your interest, and I hate this thing, okay, goes 817, and if you do 3 years, you're paying 591. So you pay more interest if you obviously if it's over a longer time, then also using the same but doing the rate like what we have up there. So it calculates differently, but either way, what I was trying to show you here, if I can get back to, is that the terms matter when you're getting financing. Like if you do 5-year, 3-year, you're going to pay more interest over the life, the longer term. Specifically with the mortgage here that we were, the next one here. Yeah, today's rate's probably 5%. Is you might be able to get 5. I haven't looked lately, but I'm guessing. But look at the difference in 15-year versus 30-year. Now then, of course, your monthly payment, and I don't even think I put it up there, is a lot more on a 15-year, but it's not proportionate. Like it's not as much as you would think. It doesn't double. Your payment doesn't double because you're going from 30 to 15 because of the way it works. Let's get back to here and back to our mortgage. Yeah, like 15. So there your payment is $803 a month versus here it's $552. So you're not double to go 15-year. And usually you wouldn't have the same interest rate. Usually a 15-year and a 30-year mortgage would have different rates. So let's get back again. But anyway, it's the same concept as what Jimmy talks about with compounding interest. Here, it's going in reverse. You're paying that much more. If you have a 30-year mortgage on $100,000, if you have a $100,000 mortgage, 30-year mortgage, you're paying $68,000 more over the life of that mortgage than $100,000.
I think the other thing too that I forget sometimes, and I'm trying to be better about this, but looking when I take out a loan, especially something like this in 30 years, how old will I be when I'm still making payment? Am I going to be 62?
Yeah, when you're 30, you don't think about that as much, but when you get to where we're at now, yeah, you start thinking about that because all right, when do I want to retire? At what age am I going to retire? Am I still going to have debt that I'm paying off when I go to retire? That's actually a question that you go back to asking yourself about what you're doing there. Yeah, because at this point, if I were to go out and get a 30-year mortgage, then I'd have to be working well past retirement age till that's paid off.
I think college debt is like going to be really impactful for these guys here in a few years, but you know, the college loans, in-school tuition, out-of-school tuition, all these things come to mind, and again, you know, what kind of degree am I pursuing? Is it worth it?
Well, that was what I was about to say. Now, for you young people thinking about college, I think, is college a good investment? That used to not be a question. It was like, you're going to go to college to go. These days, I think it really depends on what you want to do. Like if you're going to, obviously if you're going to be a doctor, you have to go to college to be a doctor. If you're going to be something, if you're, whatever it is, there's things that you have to go to college to do. There are other skills that would not involve having to go to college that you can make pretty good money at. If you're not real good at school and you can go to a trade school or get in, you can avoid all that college debt and go in. So you really have to think about what is it that I'm wanting to do. I think a lot of students these days are getting caught with like degrees that don't serve any purpose in the real world, and then they have a $300,000 college debt and a degree that means nothing, that they can't get a job for, and they're going out and they're doing a job that they could have done without going to college.
Well, yeah, me for example, I went to school for advertising, 4 years out of state tuition. Didn't use it. I was a property manager working with people who had GEDs doing the same job. So I had that 4 year degree. It was a great experience going to Christian University, private school, but I have that debt, and then I went back to school, accumulated another $125,000.
Yep.
And here I am now 42 and having to, so I have a great job, I have a great, but that loan is something you don't really consider, like, kind of having a goal in mind before you enter into college, I think is really important.
For sure. And also, even if you need the college degree, do you have to go to that school that you picked out from the time you were, in junior high, or is it better to go to a community college and then, there are cheaper ways to go about getting that college degree.
There are actually a lot of ways
Yeah.
to get credits
Mm-hmm.
without even going through even the community college. You can get credits while you're still in high school. You can get
Right, credits in high school, yeah. And there's a lot of colleges that do online stuff that's a lot cheaper now than go, because what's part of the cost of college is it's room and board, right? That's a pretty significant cost of it. So there's a lot of things to think about as you're doing that. And I'm not trying to encourage or discourage anybody from going to college. That's not the point. It's think about it. What makes sense to you? Yeah.
It's like Nancy said, you don't think about it. Like currently my student loans are almost double of our mortgage. So like which at 21, going to Penn State when I should have went to the community college. Like, you know what I mean? There were just certain things, like if I could go again, I would have done maybe 2 years of like the community college.
Right. Yeah, like that's another option. Like, you could do 2 years of community college and then go to the school for the next 2 years. Once again, if you check to make sure that your credits will transfer, there's all kinds of things to think about whenever you're doing that. And I'm pretty far away from that at this point. So.
I'm in the thick of it. So
Yeah.
if you guys go to college, come talk to me first, and I'll tell you all the mistakes.
Yeah, I
We'll
didn't
line them
have
up.
until we moved out here. So
Yeah.
I went to a private school.
All right, we'll talk about paying off debt here in just a moment. So that's going to be important as far as how that goes. All right, any other comments on college since we have our young people here before we go on? Good luck. All right. All right, so much of what we have or will talk about in this series gives us the principles for how to know to deal with debt. Knowing your financial condition. Well, let's see. I think that's my next. Yeah, here we go. How do you deal with debt? See, I keep forgetting I have this all up here. All right, know your financial condition. Now, then that's something we haven't actually gone in detail of, and I'm not going to take the time right now because we want to do all this stuff, but knowing your financial condition. What's a financial condition? Well, that would be, if you're a business, that would be called a balance sheet, your assets and liabilities, and the assets minus liabilities equals your net worth. If you have more debt than you have assets, that means you have a negative net worth, which means you owe people more than what you have. So going back to an example of that, if all you owned was a new car that you just bought on a lot, and you just left the lot, are you positive or negative in your financial condition? You're negative because your car just went down $10,000 or whatever right after you drove it off, and you have a loan for the full amount of the car or very close to it, so you are negative. What if you bought a house with a mortgage? That's what I'm talking about. That might be a different situation because you owe, and usually you can't borrow 100% of the mortgage anyway, so of the house value, I should say. So you should, in theory, have a positive net position if the only thing you had was the house. And that's, we're just throwing out scenarios there. So that's, if that was all you had, you would be positive in that instance. So anyway, that's what you need to think about. And our goal is to not be negative on that front. We talked about this, and we'll go into more about how you do this. Create a detailed budget. A lot of people will do a pseudo budget, and what they'll leave out of that budget is the things that, I'm going to get coffee this morning, or I'm going to get this. You have to have everything budgeted. So if you're going to spend, if you know you're going to spend $300 on coffee in a month, which hopefully you're not, but if you are, that needs to be part of the budget, and you better have it in there. So knowing what all you're spending money on and creating a detailed budget, very important to dealing with that. Tracking where you spend money. Once again, you have to track it in order to do a budget. So if you're spending $300 a month on coffee and you don't know it, you can't put it in your budget. So tracking where you spend money. Like we talked about last week, there are apps out there to help you with that. If you're spending money online or they'll pull things in automatically and track them and categorize them and stuff like that. So there are tools out there for that kind of thing if you need help with that. Cut costs wherever possible. Have you seen those commercials about the people that have all those online subscriptions like to Hulu, Disney, whatever? I guess those are together probably. But HBO Max and Sling, and you got all these subscriptions and they don't ever cancel them, and so they're all out there. And so there's apps out there now. This is pretty amazing to me. There's apps out there now to actually track your subscriptions so you know what's out there and what needs to be canceled. So anyway, if you have 100 subscriptions, you should probably cut some of them, but cut costs wherever possible.
If you have 5 subscriptions, you're paying $100 a month on average.
Yeah. So
It's easy to get 5
Yep.
subscriptions.
So that adds up pretty quick. There again, when you start talking about it's $20 for this subscription a month, if I have 5 of them, it's 100, and then 100 times 12, that's $1,200 a year. So it adds up.
Most people won't think of, I'm going to go out and subscribe for 5 things, but.
Yeah, it just it happens, yeah.
This or
And then you don't, right, and that's what they're talking about whenever people you take the free trial and then you don't remember to cancel it. That's whenever you can get into trouble, yep. Create a plan, set goals, and stick to it. So don't just shoot from the hip as far as your debt goes. If you know you're in debt, you know you're in trouble, actually before even, so all of these principles apply whether you're in debt or not. Create a plan, set goals, and stick to it. All right, and let's see, where am I at now? All right, so like I said, some guidelines from the Money Matters video. Their first thing as far as dealing with debt, save money. So what we talked about before with the car or with the credit card, like why would you ever need to use a credit card if you have your emergency fund? Save money. Now then, you may say, well, I'm in debt and I can't save money, or I don't make enough to save money. I would argue everybody who's making money can save $10 a week. You know, in other words, start small. Do something and start saving. That will build eventually. The goal, I think, is generally said to be 3 months of living expenses. Am I right on that? 3 to 6 months. So you want to have in the bank money that you can access fairly easily, 3 to 6 months of living expenses built up. And they suggest doing that even if you are in debt. Like even if you were paying, at least that's my understanding of the way they're saying it. Like you should build that reserve first. Second thing they say is to quit borrowing money. So don't borrow more money to pay off the debt that you are in. And I'll talk about that in just a second here a little bit more, but borrowing more money to pay for current items will eventually lead you to what? Bankruptcy, yep. Once again, don't want to rain on your parade, but think about what our politicians keep doing. They keep kicking the bucket down to the future. So we don't want to do that. Don't follow their example. Number 3, ask God for help. Don't leave God out of this, right? That's what we tend to do whenever we're making decisions with like big decisions. We might not consider that, but ask God for help. Pray to God and truly seek his guidance in these kind of things. And then what they call a debt snowball is a way to handle debt. And that's why I was saying quit borrowing money. Quit borrowing money can be a snowball in the wrong direction. Like it just keep getting worse and worse and worse. If you're already in debt, an important principle that Dave Ramsey talks about is the debt snowball. When you have several different types of debt, such as credit card debt, car loan, whatever different kinds of debt there are, he would say, well, first off, each of these would have a different monthly payment that's putting a strain on your monthly budget, right? You have to pay each of them monthly. To get out of debt, he would suggest paying the lowest amount first. So in other words, whatever your lowest payment is, or not lowest payment, lowest amount left, get that paid off as quickly as you possibly can, and then what happens? Your monthly, your spendable monthly amount went up by whatever that debt payment was because you're no longer having to make that debt payment. So you have more money to spend, and then put that into the next biggest loan that's out there, biggest amount you owe. Focus on paying that off, and that's the snowball. Like each time you pay it off, you have more in your monthly income to pay off what's out there. Does that make sense?
It's almost like getting a raise.
Yeah, it's like giving yourself a raise. Yeah, you're getting things paid off. You're getting more spendable money, and then you use that to pay off the debt. You continue to do that until you've got it all paid off, and so on and so on. So.
I think, Brent, I was going to say that goes back to the discipline. When you start paying off those smaller debts, then I think Dave Ramsey says like that triggers something mentally for you where you see that that's paid off. That feels good psychologically, and then you want to continue instead of accruing more debt. And you see, oh, I can pay this one off and put that money towards your next.
Towards your next one, right?
Continuing to build debt through paying things off.
Right, and I think all of these things together are important because what happens if you don't save, if you don't have any savings and your refrigerator breaks down? you have to take on more debt to get the refrigerator, right? So that's why, I think that's why the saving money is like the first thing they put there, because you need to have that backup so that you never are having to dig into taking on more debt. So you get the savings there, and then you start working on paying down the debt and getting it to where you're paid off. All right. So what's the results of dealing with unwise debt? Financial freedom, right? We've heard that term before, right? Financial freedom. We're free from anxiety and worry over where the money is going to come from. We're free. We're free from feeling like we have to work 2 jobs to keep up. Free to enjoy our life more. It's freedom across the board as far as what the results are. And of course, the key to that is going back to some of our biblical principles. We talked about being content, right? Being content with what we have, because if you didn't have debt payments, if you didn't do more to get debt payments, would you be happy with what you have? Can you live that way? Also, if you had no debt payments, how much could you save each month? Think about that. How much is going to service your debt? And how much could you give if you had no debt payments? All right. Any other comments on anything I didn't cover there on debt? Hopefully that gets you.
I've always disagreed with Dave Ramsey on this to a point. Like, I believe that teaching children how to use a credit card properly and paying it off every month can actually help you in the future, because you have to, with the world we live in, have a credit score. If you don't show that you can responsibly pay anything off, your credit score goes up. Then when you buy that car, you buy your house, you get a 2%, 3% worse interest rate, and you see what interest rates do to everything.
Yeah.
So you have to somehow build your credit up at a young age, or else you're going to pay for it in interest till you get your house.
To be honest, I haven't actually watched Dave Ramsey or listened to him all that much. A little bit. I know we do stuff with Ramsey stuff, and I think Lisa has more experience with what he says and everything. That is what he says. Yeah, no credit. Don't use the credit card. Now, why does he say not to use the credit card? It doesn't really have to do with debt per se.
Well, it's not buying something you don't have.
Right. He says not to use the credit card. My understanding, anyway, is that he says not to use the credit card because paying with cash triggers something in your mind that you don't want to do it. Like, you don't want to pay. Whereas with a credit card, it doesn't matter as much. So you're willing to spend more using a credit card than you are when you're paying with cash. That's his reasoning, I think, for why not to use a credit card. Now, the reason that you gave for a credit card is perfectly logical. There's also other reasons to use a credit card, like you can get rewards from using a credit card and cash back and things like that. But what's the catch there? The businesses, well, they're already paying for it, so that's generally not a problem. It can be a problem if the businesses tell you. I think, like, if people go to give for Walk for Water on Healing Hands site, it'll say, do you want to add 3% to this contribution to pay for the fee that's going to come? Like, it'll say that. Or when I go to my doctor, I think they say you can pay $50 or you can pay $51, depending on whether you're going to pay with credit or whether you're going to just pay with cash or a check. So that's built in. But when you're dealing with Amazon or Walmart or your big retailers, the price is already built in. So you're not using or not using a credit card doesn't matter as far as your price goes there. You're not paying more for it. You already are paying more for it, I guess you could say. So that's not the reason. The reason to not use the credit card, besides spending too much, would be if you carry a balance. What are the interest rates on credit cards? Yeah, like 20%, right? I mean, it's massive. So that's why you don't ever carry a balance on a credit card. So if you're using a credit card, you have to pay it off each month. So you can never spend more money than what you can pay off, or else you are paying a whole lot of interest on it. So I think that's the difference in the thinking. I don't know, is there a way to build credit if you don't use a credit card?
Basically you can, but I think.
You can, but you got to go through a lot.
There's more, you have to show more, if you go to get a mortgage, you have
have to show them other things other than your credit score. So he would
So you
say-
can't use your credit score to go get that
You
then.
don't need a credit score per se. It makes things more inconvenient, yes. But he would say, in the end, you're probably saving money because you're never risking that 20% interest rate. You're spending less, so you're gonna make up for it.
So that's Dave
I'm not saying
Ramsey,
I agree,
yeah.
But that's his logic.
So Dave Ramsey's argument is that you can still go out and get a good mortgage without a credit score.
And you shouldn't be buying a car on credit. And so the only
Yeah.
thing he allows for is the mortgage, and you can do it without a credit score.
Okay.
So you can do a lot with debit card. And he also says the temptation, like just too many people.
Yeah, it goes back to that discipline. Like too many people are not disciplined
Right.
to say, well, I can't go out and get this right now because I don't have the money. If you have that credit line there available. So that would be why he would argue on that front. All right, well, we're just about out of time, and we're at a good stopping point because we're ready to start in on investments. So next week we'll kick off with investing, saving and investing, and if we have time and it fits, I told Jimmy that this is where he could give you guys a little bit of a quick tutoring on actually making your own investments online. Even though that's not necessarily, once again, that's not something we're recommending to people, but just something to show you guys how to do it. I'll talk about ways that you can invest without doing what he'll show you whenever we get into this. But I haven't ever done that. Like I've never gotten online and done my own investing. I always use company 401k or an investment planner or advisor, those kind of things. So anyway, we'll do some of that next week, and we'll be back for worship in about 15 minutes.
The blessed name of Jesus.